The hype for Godzilla is real, and no, we are not letting up on the Godzilla videos. The next question is one that we always wondered about, because the more that we know about Godzilla or find out about him is the more questions we have. Are the members of Godzilla's species as strong as he is? If we're going to go with the quick answer, that would be no, and here's why. Let's assume that there are other species, that there are other members of Godzilla's species, and he's not the only one or last one of his kind. They're nowhere near he is. We've only ever seen him on the surface. Based on what the director is saying, there's a hollow earth, and they're going to be using that in the movie, so that must mean that there are a lot of kaiju, possibly Godzilla's family or other members of his species, in that hollow earth. What we also know is that Godzilla is dubbed the king of the monsters. Vera Farmiga's character in the movie says that whoever the alpha kaiju is the one that controls all the others, basically tells them what to do, when to sleep, when to surface, and what have you. Usually the King of Monsters title goes to the strongest, and that's why Ghidorah, when the ice melted or was blown up and he was set free, fought for the spot and nearly took it over because he was considerably stronger than Godzilla was. He even had the title for a short space of time. Now, the movie has not been released yet, so anything that we say in this video is going to be speculation, because you know, we only have the trailers to go off of. Newsflash, if you've seen the trailers, you've seen the spoilers. If you're in the future and you've already seen this movie, then you have nothing to worry about. Anyways, based on what we could gather, Ghidorah had a fight with Godzilla, and Godzilla lost. At least he lost that first fight. If Ghidorah got the title as the alpha monster, that means he'd be able to control the other monsters. He's basically the one responsible for waking all of them up. So this means that if Godzilla holds a title as the alpha kaiju and he tells all the other monsters to go to sleep, or he reigns supreme in his territory, what's to say that rule doesn't apply to the members of his species as well? Godzilla is seen as a solitary animal. It makes sense that they'd be solitary because they're so freaking big. So even if Godzilla wants to get some suki time, I don't see him spending that much time down below with Mrs. Godzilla, unless of course there's a lot of space down there for them to roam. Godzilla does spend the majority of his time in the ocean, possibly in that hollow earth space. For all we know, he has a wife and kids down there, and a brother named Bob. But there is a reason why he is the only one we see coming to the surface to fight off other kaiju. Now, of course, there is the theory that Godzilla could be the one coming to the surface because that's just his shtick. He just decided to be the first caveman to venture away from the cave, the one to discover fire, and go to the surface to explore. Based on what they said in Godzilla Awakening, these monsters used to live on the surface, and then when the environment wasn't very hospitable, they went closer to the earth to try and seek refuge or to adapt from the changing environment on the surface. So basically, Godzilla and all the other kaiju realized that it wasn't safe on the surface of the earth anymore, maybe because meteors were knocking into the earth, or there was just too much climate change. It just wasn't comfortable up there. So everyone made their home, presumably, in the hollow earth. Maybe Godzilla is the only one to decide to go back to the surface. So if they're the same species, his members, family members, what have you, then yeah, it's possible that they are as strong as he is if we're going with that theory. Now, if we're going with the theory that I proposed before, where he is basically the guardian of the surface or the one chosen to battle other kaiju, then it's possible that he is the strongest, and that's why he was chosen to fight the other kaiju. He's the alpha, and so they listen to him. So he is in control of all the other kaiju, telling them to sleep and not to surface, but he's also in control of members of his species as well, if they're still alive down there. Now, let's say that Godzilla is the last one of his kind. He is the only member of his species. Then that must have, sorry, no offense, but that must mean that they weren't as strong as he was, because he's the last surviving one. He could have just been lucky, or he could have been super intelligent, and for that, the strongest and the smartest survive, which he did. The only other evidence we have of another Godzilla in the Monsterverse is when we see that fossil, that humongous skeleton of another Godzilla creature in the 2014 movie. Notice it was near the surface too. So if Godzilla is the last one alive, he is alive for a reason, and that's because he either has superior genes, intelligence, wit, and durability. It is also possible that his bloodline and genes resulted in having a thicker hide, better atomic breath, and better intelligence than the other members of his species with their bloodlines. It is a possibility. Whatever the theory, whether he is the last one of his kind, whether there are other members of his species, we can all agree that Godzilla is the strongest. That's why he's on the surface. If he's the last one of his kind, that's why he's the only one left alive. When it comes to basic strength, if you're asking how big they are, if they have the same powers that he does, most likely, yes, they do. In the earlier and older movies, Godzilla is just seen as a creature that started off as something else and then became Godzilla when he became mutated through bombs or nuclear radiation or whatever have you. He didn't start off as him. He was something else that got mutated into this. Well, in the Monsterverse or modern Godzilla movies, Godzilla was always a Godzilla. Based on what they said, he and the other kaiju were ancient creatures that lived way before the dinosaurs, and they were always what they were. Of course, it's fun to theorize the other hypotheticals, but based on what we've been given, that's the most likely answer. Anyways, hope that answered your question. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Altiori. You ask, we answer.